All right, so let's get into it. Part one. Let's learn about the structure of your hair, which is a delightfully complex biological material, and then let us explore the oils that exist in your hair. So, what is hair exactly? We have this stuff, it exists on our heads, and if we're lucky, all over our bodies as well. We can twist it, plait it, straighten it, flexi rod it, wet set it, cut it, grow it, put Gorilla Glue in it. It has immense cultural, social, and psychological significance, but it's not an essential organ like your heart or your intestines. On your scalp and all over your body, you have these little burrows, which are called follicles. You may have also heard them referred to as pores. And these are the structures from which your hairs emerge. So what we can see in this gorgeous graphic are the basal cells, which sit at the base of the follicle, and they divide rapidly. These cells contain a lot of a protein called keratin, which is the substance which gives our skin and nails, as well as our hair, their firmness. As these cells divide, they push the cells that are higher up in this little burrow up, and that is the process of your hairs growing. And as they rise up the follicle, the cells begin to elongate and specialize into the different regions of your hair. They also begin to die, and as they die, they release their keratin and they become hard. On the previous slide, I mentioned that the cells that make up your hair specialize into the different structures. These structures are the cortex, which makes up the bulk of your hair strand, the medulla, which is the centermost part of your hair strand, mainly comprised of air and only present in very thick hairs, and then the outermost cuticle, which resembles tiles on a roof. So you have these little cells that are kind of stacked on each other like tiles on a roof. And that cuticle layer is the outermost protective layer. So we have the medulla, the cortex, and the cuticle. We talked about keratin, and we mentioned that it is a protein. Now, without going into too much detail, a protein is a large molecule made up of a lot of amino acids. Amino acids all have the same basic structure. They have an acidic side and an alkaline side. And then they also have an R group, which is unique to that particular amino acid. And they have a central carbon in the middle. Amino acids bind together to make a chain like this, and they can form really complex structures. So lots of amino acids together, those are called a polypeptide or a protein. And proteins are a huge part of what we are, and our hair is no exception to that. So what we can see here are the polypeptide chains. So basically these chains, so this would be two of those chains that are wound round together. So they wind round each other to form a substance called a protofilament. And then the protofilaments wind together and intertwine to form what are called intermediate filaments. And then intermediate filaments combine to form what are called macrofibrils. And these very long structures are present in the elongated cells in your hair. So we talked about the fact that when the cells, as your hair is growing, as they rise up the follicle, they elongate and they die. Well, these would be the cells, and they contain these proteins, these elongated structure. And this is keratin, and it is suspended in other protein. So that was a lot, but The main point so far is that your hair is made up of elongated cells containing a protein called keratin. Why did I show you all of this? Well, I wanted you to get a clear picture of the structure of your hair so that you could begin to understand how oils might come in. I also wanted you to have a greater appreciation for the fact that your hair is dead. And I find this absolutely fascinating, and I imagine that you might do as well. So that was a lot. Take a moment. You can pause the recording, stand up, stretch a bit, and come back, and we will continue. Are you ready to continue? Before I continue, I want you to reflect about your knowledge of hair and already think about the oils that exist naturally in your hair. What springs to mind? Write it down or make a mental note of it. Okay, so the first oil, which you've probably already heard of, is your sebum, and it's produced by the sebaceous glands, which are seated within your hair follicles. And the sebum comes out of the hair follicles and serves to lubricate and coat your scalp and your hair. It controls the skin surface pH, so prevents it from getting too acidic or too alkaline, and it protects your hair and scalp against free radicals and UV light. But in addition to your sebum, did you know that there is a layer of lipids, aka oil, that is strongly bound to the outer layer of your hair? So it just rolls off the tongue. 18-methyl eicosanoic acid, also known as 18-MEA, is a fatty layer which is hydrophobic. So that means it repels water, and it is bound to your hair's cuticle. So you have a layer basically of oil that is strongly stuck to the outer layer of your hair, and it protects your hair and prevents your hair from absorbing too much water. So this presence of this, you can imagine that if there's an oil that's strongly stuck to something, it's going to help that substance repel water. So you may have heard the terms high and low porosity. The presence of 18-MEA on the surface of your hair will influence your porosity, and that's just how readily water comes into your hair. So if your 18-MEA layer is intact, as is expected, especially closer to the roots where your hair has experienced less wear and tear, then when you wet it, you will see little droplets of water formed and gradually being absorbed. Contrastingly, if you have a not so intact 18-MEA layer on the surface of your hair, then water will seep in rapidly. And this rapid swelling can actually damage your cuticle scales. Do you remember the main layers of your hair? Pause the video and write them down. What were they? They were the cuticle, the cortex, and the medulla. Well, in between the cells that make up these layers, there is a cement that makes the hair pliable and flexible. So we have structural lipids that exist between the cells and help your strands maintain strength and flexibility at the same time. This is a simplified diagram of your hair, and I chose to represent the cells of the cuticle, the cortex. So we have the cuticle, the cortex, and the medulla as these hexagonal bricks. And we have these black spaces in between. These would be the cement. So this cement is what holds the cells together. And it is joined to the 18-MEA, which sits on the surface of your strands. Unfortunately, normal grooming practices and exposure to the elements leads to the loss of this intercellular So that inter means between and cellular means cells. So this kind of grout here, it leads to the loss of this intercellular grout over time. Innocent practices like swimming and shampooing can also contribute to this. And once lost, the proteins that they help to hold in place become more vulnerable. That was part one. Now it's time for some quiz questions. So you can do the quiz questions and then watch as we go through the answers together.